Welcome. So glad you're here. My name's Beth McClure, and I am the Communications Director here at The Gathering. If you are new, we would love it if you would subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss any new content coming from us here at The Gathering. We have messages that come out every week, and you can access them on demand anytime throughout the week. We also have some links for you in the description. So there's a link to go learn more about The Gathering. There's a link to give. If you've been watching online a while and feel like The Gathering is your church community, we would love to invite you into the practice of generosity by giving to the church. We also have a connect link. So if you're new, fill out that card. It just gives us your information so someone from The Gathering can follow up with you, check in, and let you know a little more about us. Today, we are starting a new series called Multiply, and it's about how we, The Gathering, are growing as a church, but really how we are all personally called to invite others to know Jesus and participate in this messy, loving, wonderful community that we call church. So again, I'm so glad you're here. If something speaks to you today, please share it with a friend who you think might need it. And with that, I invite you to enjoy the sermon.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Gathering. It's so good to have you in worship with us today. So around 1800, there were these two brothers, Thomas and William Gillum, who moved from Kentucky right across the river from St. Louis over in Illinois in a settlement that they called the 6 Mile Settlement. Now, they creatively named it that because it just so happened to be 6 miles from St. Louis. But anyway, these two guys were Methodists. And so when they arrived, they started gathering people in their home to have a Methodist meeting. This would later become a worship service. Right there on site, they ended up building a proper church building. That church ended up being named Niedering House Methodist Church. And by the 1970s, this is what it looked like. And in 1979, into that building, there was a young couple who decided to walk through those doors with their then overactive 2-year-old that they thought desperately needed religion. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Well, that young couple, that was my parents, and that overactive 2-year-old who needed Jesus, that was me. And I think about this, but they walked through those doors and immediately they were greeted by people who gave up their time and got there early in the morning just so that they could be greeters in church. I was raised in a nursery and taught Bible stories in Sunday school by people who gave up their time and their energy to staff those rooms. I think about this a lot, but that community really laid a foundation for my faith, and that foundation would end up turning into a call for ministry. And you know the rest of that story, at least for me. And I was thinking about that this past week because that church doesn't exist anymore. It closed many years ago. But I got to thinking that my own experience of God, my own growth in faith, the support that I felt and received growing up, it largely came from a bunch of people whose names oftentimes I don't even know anymore. I mean, all of that was made possible because there were these people that gave up their homes to start a new church. They invested time and energy and money to build church buildings. It's because of countless volunteers who decided to greet and teach Sunday school. All of that ended up creating a community of faith that deeply impacted me. These pioneers, because that's what I think they are, these creators of community gave up so much so that I could have a church that would teach me who God was and who Jesus was. And I want you to think about that because today we're beginning a new series called Multiply. And this whole series is really centered on one question that I want us to focus on as individuals and as a church. And the question is this: are you a creator or a consumer? I want you to think about that for a second. Are you a creator or a consumer, particularly when it comes to church or when it comes to faith? Are you a creator of faith or are you just a consumer of faith? This is an important question because you see, for Jesus, for the first followers, they didn't just want to receive a faith from God, but instead, Christ challenged them to be creators of faith for the sake of other people. This mindset was really summed up in the simplest way by Paul when he writes this in his letter to the Romans. He says, "Welcome each other in the same way that Christ also welcomed you, for God's glory." I know it's just one verse, but I want you to think about this with me for just a second. Remember, Paul was writing to a brand new church in Rome. I mean, this was like one of the first churches in the world. And what that meant is this movement was brand new. None of these people grew up in the church. None of these people were just born into it. None of them had been Christians their whole life, like some of us. All of these people only believed in Jesus because probably like a year or two prior, somebody came around, Paul and a few others came around to tell them about Jesus. And so this was really recent experience. Paul gave up a pretty comfortable life of being a Pharisee to go out on the road and to sacrifice a lot so that he could start sharing the news about this new Messiah. There were people in Rome, usually women, who let people meet in their homes, who gave a lot of money so that these first churches could get started. Those early missionaries gave up a lot of status. In some cases, they endangered themselves and their families for the sake of this new burgeoning religion. But they did it, they sacrificed all of this because Jesus had so changed their life that they wanted to share Jesus with other people. And so Paul challenges that first church. He challenges them with these words, "Welcome others just as Jesus welcomed you." You see, Paul wanted, the first church not just to have this beautiful relationship with Christ, not just to worship God, and not just to benefit in all the ways that they would benefit from that relationship, but Paul wanted them to also be willing to offer that opportunity, that invitation to other people around them. To look at those who might be alienated or far away, who feel like they don't belong, and invite them to know the God that they themselves had met. And so in this one simple verse, Paul is really kind of asking them to do two things. First, he's asking them to remember who created faith for you. Paul is saying, I want you to remember that you were welcomed in by Jesus, and oftentimes the way that Jesus welcomes us is through other people. You see, friends, we're called to be creators of faith for others because somebody first welcomed us. Someone who didn't have to, someone that oftentimes probably sacrificed something that they didn't want to sacrifice, somebody who gave up something. They had to do that so that we could be welcomed in. The first thing Paul wants us to do is remember. And it's important sometimes for us to remember. I think it's important for us to remember that we didn't get to where we are in faith or in life on our own. We didn't do this alone. And that's important because we live in a culture, right, where this idea of like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is so much a part of our popular culture. But if you think about it, none of us got to where we are alone. This is true in every aspect of our lives. I mean, just first, biologically, we are here because of other people, our parents. We grew up in a town that was started by settlers and pioneers, other people who built up institutions like schools and churches that we could go to. Educationally, we didn't get to where we are alone. A lot of us had wonderful teachers who invested more than they had to. We were given scholarships, many of us, to go off and to study at places that we ourselves couldn't afford. Professionally, so many of us like to think that we did it all by our own hard work. But the truth is, if you look back, many of you had mentors and other people that poured into you when they didn't have to help you get to where you are. And the same thing, of course, is true spiritually. We don't come to faith alone, but we come to faith because somebody somewhere invited us in and invested their time, energy, and money to raise us up. For those of you who just grew up in the church, it takes work sometimes to remember that you were taught in Sunday school by people with busy lives who oftentimes spent their own money to buy supplies so that they could creatively teach you the stories of the Bible. For those of you who are adults and didn't come to church until more recently, you got here usually because somebody decided to risk looking foolish and offering you an invitation. You were greeted by people who gave up their time and energy to get here early to do that. You were shared the gospel by a preacher, oftentimes a preacher who questioned themselves and weren't sure if they knew what they were doing, who offered a word. You came to faith because of a community of other people that decided to live beyond themselves. And so today I want you to think about who were the people that helped create faith for you. Maybe there's a lot of names that you don't know, you can't remember, but I want you to think about that for a second. Who are the people that helped create faith in you and for you? Who helped create faith for you? And then I want you to think about, what did they have to do? What do you think they had to give up? What trade-offs did they make? What did they maybe sacrifice so that they could give a little part of who they were to help create space for someone else like you? You see, Paul encourages people to remember that they were first welcomed in. Because once we remember that we were welcomed in by somebody else, that we found a place because of somebody else, that we felt secure in community because of somebody else, that we got to know Jesus because of somebody else, then Paul gives us the challenge. It's now your turn to help welcome others. And friends, I'll be honest, this is the part of the verse that gets really hard. Because while we love being the recipients of the work and sacrifice of others, it's a lot harder for us to be challenged. Now it's your turn to give up something. It's your turn to be inconvenienced. It's your turn to make a sacrifice so that other people can experience what you have experienced. To say it maybe more straightforwardly, it is easier to be consumers of faith than creators of faith. It just is. And yet we are called to be creators. I want you to just think about this. Let's go all the way back to the creation story. You've heard me read this because I've read it a few times in the past couple months. But Genesis says this about how you and I were made. It says, God created humanity in God's own image. The divine image, God created them. Male and female, God created them. And then God blessed them and said to them, be fertile and multiply. Now, really quickly, I want you to pay attention. This is our origin story, right? And the first thing the Bible tells us is that God created us in God's image. Now, a lot of people have wondered, what does it mean that you and I are created in God's image? Well, it probably means a lot of different things, but I think at least part of what it means is God was a creator. That's the only thing we know about God so far, is that God cared enough to pour God's self out to create human beings. And we're created in God's image, so we are created to be creators. Just as life was given to us, we were created to give life to other people. And then God makes it clear. It says that God blessed the first humans and said, be fertile and multiply. Now, I know that a lot of you think this is just about go have a lot of kids. And that's part of what it means. But it's not just biological. I mean, this is a metaphor, really. God blesses the first human beings and says, now I want you to go multiply that blessing for others. God gives life to the first human beings and says, now I want you to go give life to others. God creates the first humans and says, now I want you to go and create for the sake of other people. In other words, don't just consume what I've given you, but help create it for other people. And friends, I read this, and in the simplest way, I think what it means is that you and I are wired. I mean, we are wired to create. And yet we live in a world where we are so tempted to consume. And I picked that word consume for a specific reason, because more than at any other point in human history, we are conditioned right now, especially in this country, to be consumers. I mean, we live in a capitalistic society. We all know that. And we measure the worth and the status of people by what we accumulate and what we have, what we make. We're surrounded by retailers who want to sell us something, and they make it so easy for us to buy it. We're surrounded by service providers who want us to give them their money so that they can provide us some service. We have companies vying for our money, our brand loyalty, our attention. And the truth is, because all these people want us to be consumers of them, they make it really easy for us to do it. We can kind of have what we want, when we want to have it, for as cheap as we want. And guess what? If you don't get it from one person, you can just move on to the next. If this person isn't meeting your needs, you can find somebody else who will. We do this with retailers, we do it with service providers, we do it with preschools for our kids or sports leagues, we do it with communities or neighborhoods or cities. We want what we want when we want it in the most convenient and cheapest way possible. And if we're not getting it here, we are more than happy to go seek it out somewhere else. What I'm getting at is we just see life. We see everything through the lens of a consumer. Customer is king, and we're the customer. And here's the thing. The problem with that is that same mindset then carries over to our spiritual life. It carries over to church, right? After all, we call it church shopping, don't we? We're the customer. The church is now the service provider. And when we go to find a church, we're looking for the option that best fits us. We go to the church that's the most convenient, that's located in the best spot, that has the best time for worship, that has all the ministries that we need, that has a wonderful kids ministry, that has the kind of music that we like, and a preacher that agrees with our basic sensibilities. And we shop for the church that works best. And if we're at one and it starts to get hard and it's not exactly what we want, guess what? We'll pull up stakes and we'll go on and we'll move to a new one, no problem. That's how we see church. And let me be really clear, I get it. I really do. I get that that's how a lot of you found this church. But here's the problem if we never challenge that mindset. The problem is we get into church, and pretty quickly, if you're in church like this, you're going to meet a Jesus who suddenly challenges that way of thinking. We're going to meet a Jesus who challenges us to think more of others than we do about ourselves, to give more away than we actually receive, to serve rather than just to be served. To follow Jesus means to sometimes be inconvenienced, to follow when it's hard, to give when we don't necessarily want to give, to obey when we don't really want to obey, to even sacrifice something that might be valuable or costly to us. Here's the thing, Jesus doesn't fit our idea of convenience. And when we have this consumer mindset, it becomes very hard for us to be inconvenienced by Jesus, to give up something of ourselves so that someone else might have what we have. But friends, that's exactly what Jesus asks. That's what creation requires. To create is to sacrifice the immediate for the sake of something long term. To create means that we might give up something now for the sake of something better in the days to come. To create means that we might give of ourselves so that somebody else might experience what we have. To create might mean to give up what works best for me or what's best for my family or what's most convenient for my life so that somebody else can find what we ourselves have found. You see, consumers don't bear fruit, they eat it. Consumers don't create new things, they enjoy the things that other people have created for them. Consumers don't give up something so that someone else can have. They expect others to sacrifice so that they can enjoy. But I want you to hear me. We are not intended to be containers for consumption, but rather catalysts for creation. That is how we are made. To create means to be captured by a vision of something greater than your own comfort. And that's a really hard thing. A hard thing to preach, and even harder thing to practice. But friends, it is so, so rewarding when you make that mindset shift. It's so powerful to be part of something that is bigger than you, but it takes intentionality. It takes work. Friends, here's sort of my driving purpose in ministry. A lot of you ask me, Matt, why'd you go into ministry? Like, why do you decide to do what you do? And let me just say it really plainly. I have received so much from Jesus and from the church over the course of my life. I mean, the church was a place that nurtured me, that taught me, that opened my mind to ideas and a way of living that was beyond myself. I've said this before, Jesus literally saved my life at several different points. I believe that Jesus saved me from a life that would have been spent on things that were kind of meaningless and worthless. Jesus at various times has saved me from making huge mistakes. Other times when I made huge mistakes, it was the grace of Jesus that helped knit my life back together. I believe that Jesus has absolutely saved my life and changed it. And here's the thing, my whole ministry is simply a response to that. I want other people to experience a God that has changed my life. I want other people to feel as welcomed in the church as I felt welcomed in. I want other people to be invited to know Jesus in the way that I was invited to know Jesus. For my whole ministry, I've had this driving belief that just as I received so much from God and from the church, I'm now called to create that same experience for the sake of other people. And that's why I do what I do. And that one simple idea, that's at the heart of our entire vision here at the Gathering, to create Christian community. To create Christian community that's compelling for new generations of people. Other people who maybe feel far away or that they weren't welcome, people who are bored by the church or feel burned by the church. Our whole purpose as a church is to create community for the sake of other people. I want to just remind you all how the Gathering started, because we're not that old as a church. I want to remind you how we started. We started because 19 years ago, a group of people who, by the way, were living fine lives. They had busy lives, they had kids, they had obligations, they had work, they had plenty of stuff to do. But the Gathering started because this little group of people caught a vision of something greater than themselves. And they decided to start giving significant amounts of time, by the way, to church. In many cases, giving 10, 15 hours a week to meet and to dream about what a church could look like, to work in an old church building late at night, chipping up tile and preparing a nice space for people, to give their time and their energy, their money, so that something new could be created. They had busy lives, busy schedules, but they wanted to do something that was uncommon, to give of themselves, and they did. Clayton, I want you to know our Clayton site started because people who were already worshiping at the Gathering already liked their experience. They'd already found their church. But those people gathered in my backyard around a barbecue, and we just shared why we thought it would be cool if we could expand and offer that experience to someone else. And these people who were quite comfortable doing what they were doing, they decided to move over to Clayton and to start a community for other people in a space that didn't necessarily feel like home at first, to do more work than they would have had to do if they just stayed at the original McCausland site, but they did it. Our Webster site. Friends, our Webster site started because people who already went to this church, who, by the way, were busy and they had kids, they had obligations, they had schedules. They decided to take a school building and every single Sunday have to spend like 2 hours before church unloading a trailer and setting it up. And some of you people remember because you were those people giving up so much every single Sunday. Why? Because they wanted some of their friends and people in their community to have a church that was different, a church where they could be welcomed and they would know the love of Christ. Our church is the product of so many of you that have chosen to be creators and not just consumers of faith. And here's the thing, I don't ever want us as a church to stop doing that, to stop having that mindset. And that's why this year, we're doing it again. Not once, but twice, actually. You know, a year ago, the Gathering launched what we called a Church Planters Lab. This was a brand new idea, and what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring into our church a couple of younger, newer pastors who had a vision for this kind of work, for starting new things. For the past year, these people would learn and would grow and would see what we do here at the Gathering and would try to figure out what is God calling them to do. Well, we had 3 people that said yes to this opportunity, and you all have gotten to know them. We had Pastor Morgan, who came to us from North Carolina. We had Pastor Aaron, who moved here from Austin, Texas, and of course, Ryan, who was already on our staff as our worship leader for a long time, but was beginning to sense a different call to ministry. And you know what? For the past year, these 3 have been praying and observing and shadowing and learning and trying to figure out, what is God calling me to start? And our goal with this whole program is at the end, one of 3 things would happen. That these pastors would either decide to start a new church, would decide to maybe start a site here at the Gathering, or decide to just go to an existing church with a mindset of wanting to start new things. And as many of you know, this spring, each of them finally figured out what it is that they wanted to do. From this work of praying and watching and working, several exciting things have developed. Pastor Morgan has felt called to stay here at the Gathering. She wants to start a new site, and she feels drawn to the Metro East, where her and her husband Ian are going to soon be moving to be the pastors of our new Metro East location. Ryan, as all of you know by now, has shifted from his position leading and directing worship here at the Gathering to become a pastor, and he wants to start a new site in West County, which is where he grew up. These are going to be 2 new sites of the Gathering, and Pastor Aaron, over the course of this past year, has figured out that he wants to start a new independent United Methodist church, inspired by what he's experienced here. But Pastor Aaron is going to go this summer, and he's going to start a new United Methodist church in North County, St. Louis, that we as a church will support. We're going to help fund the beginning of it. We're going to be cheerleaders for him, but that's going to be its own church. Friends, the Gathering is going to help plant a church, and then we ourselves are going to start 2 new sites. I mean, this is bold. This is big. It's risky in some ways. And believe me, I felt a little bit of that risk, but I believe with my whole heart it's exactly what we're called to do. But here's the thing I want to leave you with. When I say that the Gathering is going to start 2 new sites, the Gathering is you. The Gathering is us together. And so over the next few weeks, I want to challenge you to consider, how is God calling you to help be creators of these new communities? And it's going to look different for each of you. For some of you, it's just going to mean that you're going to choose to pray and to cheerlead these efforts with everything you have. Some of you might decide, I'm going to volunteer and I'm going to help get these new communities started. So, some of you might decide, I want to give an extra financial gift to help start these new things. And I'm going to start giving in a greater way because of this. For some of you, it might mean, I'm not much of an inviter, but I know people in these areas, and I'm going to risk actually inviting my friends to check out and to be a part of this. And And you know what? At least some of you, I'm going to ask to be part of the launch team. And what that means is I'm going to ask you, even though you might already love the worship service you go to or the site that you go to or it works for you, but if you live in one of these areas, I want to ask you to consider being part of the team that actually launches those new sites. Friends, all of these ways of supporting, though, will require us to shift mindsets, to resist that temptation to just be a consumer of faith and to start to be a creator. And I just want to tell you at the front end, it's hard. It's not always convenient. It may require sacrifice. But if you are part of one of these new things, it is so, so worth it. Next week, I'm going to talk about how you can be a part of it, but certainly today, you can go talk to Pastor Morgan. You can go talk to Pastor Ryan. You can hear about how you can be supportive of these new sites. But today, I want you to remember who first created space for you. Who gave up something so that you could come to faith? And then I want you today to start thinking about how you're called to create space for others. Let's pray. Gracious and holy God, you gave so that we could be. Jesus gave up his life so that we could have life. Other people who've come before us created churches and communities of belonging that one day would welcome us in. And God, we are so grateful for that. God, I'm so grateful that you welcome all of us to be called your children because of Jesus. But God, my prayer is that it wouldn't stop there. My prayer is that we wouldn't just be consumers of the grace and the gifts that you give, but instead feel that passion to also offer and create that space for others. And so, God, may that spirit blow throughout the gathering. Please, God, protect us from a mindset of just being consumers of faith. And help us instead to listen to that call of Jesus to be creators of faith for others. Today we pray for Pastor Morgan and Pastor Ryan and Pastor Aaron as they step out and answer that call to create communities for others. And may all of us, God, figure out how we can be a part of supporting that work. I pray these things in Jesus' name. And together God's people said, amen.